He was born on a cold December day in 1900 on Sumac Street in Toronto's Cabbagetown, a place known for its grit and survival. His name was Larry Gaines, a man who would one day fight his way across oceans, through prejudice, and into the hearts of boxing fans around the world. Larry didn't grow up dreaming of the ring. Boxing found him. He was about 20 when a fighter named Charlie Clay asked him to step in as a sparring partner. That one moment lit a fire that never went out. Soon, he was fighting out of the Prestimus Club in Toronto, a gym built for black boxers who were often denied opportunities elsewhere. He started winning. And when the amateur stage could no longer hold him, Larry did something bold. He left Canada on a cattle ship bound for Britain. In June 1923, the world met the Toronto Terror. London was a stage now. His fists spoke louder than any accent or color. France welcomed him too. There he met writers like Ernest Hemingway and Morley Callahan, both in young men chasing stories. Larry was writing his own story in the ring, beating Germany's Max Schmeling in 1925, long before Schmeling became a world name. 2 years later, in 1927, Toronto celebrated him as their own when he stopped Horace Soldier Jones in 5 rounds to become Canada's heavyweight champion. He defended that title with pride against the best his country had, Jack Renault and Charlie Bellinger, proving each time that he belonged at the top. But Larry wanted more. In 1930, he settled in Leicester, England, where his career reached its most defining moments. Known for his smooth boxing and sharp intelligence in the ring, he delivered a thunderous knockout against Phil Scott in front of 30,000 fans in 1931, taking the British Empire title. It was a glorious night, even though the color bar still tried to cage his victories. When that racial barrier finally broke in 1932, Larry made history again, defending his crown against Donald McCorkindale at the Royal Albert Hall. It was a night of triumph shadowed by tragedy. His trainer, Jack Goodwin, collapsed and died during the fight. Larry fought through the heartbreak and still won. That same year, he faced the giant Primo Carnera at White City Stadium, 70,000 fans watching. Carnera was 60 pounds heavier and 4 inches taller, but Larry outboxed him beautifully, earning one of the most memorable victories in British boxing history. By 1934, his reign met its end against Len Harvey and later Jack Peterson. But defeat couldn't erase what Larry Gaines had done. He had fought through barriers thicker than ropes and proved that greatness isn't given. It's earned, punch by punch, round by round. Larry Gaines was one of the best heavyweights of his time. Strong, smart, and fearless. Yet the world he lived in wasn't ready for him. Because of his skin, the doors to the British and World Championships stayed closed. Rules were written to keep fighters like him outside the spotlight. So, he fought for what the world gave him, the colored heavyweight championship of the world. He won it twice, in 1928 and again in 1935. It wasn't the title he truly deserved, but it became the crown of every fighter they tried silence. By 1934, the money slowed. Promoters turned their backs, crowds faded, and the spotlight dimmed. 3 years later, he was declared bankrupt. The same man who once earned $500,000 through sweat and bruises. Much of it gone to gambling, and maybe a little to chasing peace in a life that rarely gave him any. Still, Larry didn't stop fighting. In December 1938, he outpointed Welsh champion George James. A small victory, but a proud one. Then came the war. When bombs began to fall, he traded his gloves for service, joining the British Army as a physical training instructor. Later, he became a sergeant major in the Pioneer Corps, serving in the Middle East. Even in war, he carried the same spirit that had carried him through the ring: discipline, courage, and heart. His final bout came in June 1942 against Jack London. It wasn't for fame or fortune. It was a charity fight, raising funds for the RAF Benevolent Fund. Larry lost that night, but what mattered more was why he fought. After that, he hung up his gloves. 40 years old, 143 fights behind him, a record of 115 wins, 5 draws, and a handful of losses, mostly from his later years. Larry Gaines wasn't just a fighter in the ring. He was a fighter against the times, against barriers, against silence. He may not have worn the official crown of a world champion, but every man he fought knew they were standing across from one. After the cheers faded and the lights dimmed, Larry found peace in the sound of gloves hitting leather. He trained at the Schmeling Tavern, where world champions once prepared for their biggest nights. Between his own sessions, he began teaching young fighters, showing them the art, the rhythm, and the respect that boxing demanded. He moved around the UK, training in places like the George Pub and the Jolly Angler. Anywhere there was a ring and a dream waiting to be shaped. But life outside the ropes wasn't kind. The fame, the money, the glory, they all slipped away. By 1950, Larry was working as a laborer in Essex, just another man trying to make ends meet. Then came the lowest point. In 1953, he was jailed for taking money from a British Legion club where he worked. He admitted it, promised to pay it back, and thanks to a well-known sporting gentleman who covered the debt and court costs, Larry walked free after an appeal. It wasn't the proudest moment of his life, but it was another fight he faced and overcame. He rebuilt himself in quiet ways, became a drummer and singer in a hotel band in Southend. Later, a salvage collector around Tooting Broadway, then a car salesman, and finally, back to what he loved most, training fighters in Morton, near London. Beside him through it all was his wife, Lisa. Together, they raised 4 children, Betty, Harold, and John. In 1976, Larry put his story into words. His autobiography, The Impossible Dream, told of the boy from Cabbagetown who chased a crown the world wouldn't let him wear. The foreword came from Max Schmeling, the same man Larry had once defeated decades earlier. A quiet gesture of respect between 2 warriors. Larry Gaines passed away in July 1983 while visiting family in Cologne, Germany. A heart attack ended his life, but not his legacy. He never became the official world champion. Yet for every young fighter who looked up to him, every fan who knew his story, Larry Gaines was a champion, not by title, but by spirit. Time moved on, but Larry Gaines was never forgotten. His name lived quietly in the echoes of old rings, until history began to remember him the way it should. In 2020, author Mark Allen Baker released the World Colored Heavyweight Championship, 1876 to 1937, the first full account of the forgotten title Larry once held with pride. The book told the story of men who fought not just opponents, but barriers. The title they competed for wasn't just a belt, it was resistance. Proof that even when locked out, they would build their own doors. For decades, that colored championship stood as a quiet rebellion. A way of saying, you can draw your color lines, but you can't erase our greatness. In 2015, long after his last fight, Larry was posthumously inducted into Canada's Sports Hall of Fame. It was a moment of justice, a nod to the man who had carried both gloves and dignity through storms most couldn't imagine. By 2023, Larry's name rose once more, this time into the British Boxing Hall of Fame. And later that year, the government of Canada honored him officially, unveiling a plaque at the Cabbagetown Boxing Club, the very neighborhood where his story began in 1900. And on December 12, 2024, what would have been his 124th birthday, another plaque was unveiled at the Schmeling Hotel in Essex, where he once trained. The event, organized by the Nubian Jack Community Trust and the Gaines family, was more than a ceremony. It was a full circle, a life once overlooked, now celebrated by generations who finally understood what it took for him to stand tall in his time. Larry Gaines fought his fights. He lost some, he won many. But his greatest victory came long after the final bell, when the world finally caught up to his story.